The second half of this year has to be good for these guys, or else 2026 is going to look incredibly awkward, or they might not even be here at all. Yeah, this is a little bit more off the cuff, and I'm just kind of going on gut feelings today, but do hear me out for some of these. And if you don't like what I have to say, why don't you comment down below your 5 or 6 drivers that do need to buck their ideas up, sunshine. I think many people are going to be bringing up Franco Colapinto, so I'll just get this one out of the way. Yes, he certainly does need to have a very good second half of 2025, especially since not long after the Hungarian Grand Prix, Pirelli and Alpine were doing a tyre test, and then Franco crashed into the barrier. Oh dear. It is suffice to say that the working relationship between Alpine and Colapinto, it's not really gotten on well, has it? It's not really clicked like it did when Franco was back at Williams, and something is telling me here that he might end up back within the Williams Academy fold, either to act as the reserve for 2026 and then maybe step in should Albon or Sainz move on, or maybe into a completely different category. I recall seeing some rumours that Colapinto's team are talking to IndyCar representatives or something, but that's neither here or there. We are talking about right here, right now, and what Franco needs to do for the second half of this year in order to try and figure within 2026, because Alpine really does need to get a wriggle on to try and get some return for their $15 million investment that they paid to James Vowles for the trouble of the superstar from Grove. 1 point. That's all I think Franco needs to do. A singular point will be enough, because the A525 is in no condition for both drivers getting in the points unless there is a huge cataclysm up the top half where Alpine can sneak in and pull off a miniature version of what they were able to do in Brazil 2024. Put simply, the car and the team are absolutely no-hopers. The best-worst team, because sure, they do have 20 points to their name, and they have all come from Pierre Gasly, who is fighting for his life here, but Franco equally has shown moments where he has been able to out-qualify Pierre Gasly, and in race pace, is not that far behind the Frenchman. It's just, unfortunately, the car has not really been up to task. And not to mention, we've been at quite a few power circuits recently, which have not really truly represented the Argentinian if he's had a really good time of it, and those drive shaft issues have affected him twice in qualifying. There's just not much luck with this kid, really, and I do think there is potential, but 1 point, again, is all that he needs to do. In that car, that would be a triumph. It would be something that Jack Doohan failed to do when the A525 was amongst the midfield, or just about falling off the back end, when it could score points, or you could see Pierre trouble the top 5 if the moons and stars were aligned. Because if that does not happen, Franco could very much see himself either relegated back to the bleachers at Alpine, and then maybe Paul Aaron gets the call up next to Gasly for next year, or, like I mentioned, Franco goes back to Williams, and then some sort of arrangement is had where he does get some more extensive testing, and James Vowles is going, Franco, my boy, what happened? What happened? Do you need a cuddle? Because I'm pretty sure Carlos can attest to this, that James is very good at cuddling. And I do want to move on to Carlos Sainz next, because, let's be real, it's not been the revenge arc that I anticipated. I look back at those videos, and many people point in the comments, and I'm like, yeah, okay, alright, I was a little bit premature. But sometimes with revenge arcs, they do take a very long time to come good. This is very much in the lean phase of said arc, because it's been an absolute drubbing. Alex Albon taking names absolutely everywhere, Carlos Sainz having a huge multitude of misfortune, and starting to really realise that there is a lot to do still at Williams, and even Williams themselves getting ideas above what they were thinking about at the beginning of the year. Because having this many points, being in 5th place in the Constructors for this long, was surely not on their bingo card at the beginning of the year. And naturally, that has led that their expectations have naturally shifted upwards. I recall James saying that they would have been grateful for a P8. It would be like a win to them. Whereas now, getting a P8 where they're expecting points is a disappointment. And it's trended upwards a little bit too early. 2025, Vowles was more than happy to write off, and the drivers were just not really making expectations. I remember Sainz saying himself that P8 was probably the peak of Williams' powers with the FW47. But now it's shifted to where they can, with Albon, get top fives. Carlos not really figuring in that regard. And no, I do not think it is a skill issue in that regard, or people thinking that Carlos Sainz is a fraud. Get out of here. Absolutely not. It's just been a very major reality check where there are many hurdles that the Spaniard has to overcome, where Albon is completely synergized. But that's not saying the Thai driver has not had his fair share of complaints as well. There is still a lot to figure out in the second half of 2025, and many other midfield teams will be ready to pounce. So what Carlos Sainz needs to do in the second half of 2025 is to just simply make good on the experience that he has had, make good on the holiday that he's been able to have the last few weeks, and simply score. Hopefully, just relay to the team about what his needs are, just tighten things up in regards to operations, which has been a really major weakness and has sacrificed many opportunities for points for the Spaniard at the beginning of 2025, and simply put, just get back more opportunities to be in the top 10. Because we have seen him being able to get close to Alex and out-qualify Albon, only for him to fall back again. And naturally, the reliability has not been in Sainz's favour. Let's just say that for sure. It's not a situation where Carlos has been seen to be a hack and that he's a complete no-hoper and that he should get out of the sport. Absolutely not. If that Williams car next year is great, those two are going to sing and dance with jubilation at picking this legacy team and then being on true form, especially with Mercedes power. I think that 2025, the second half, the last 10 races, do need to be more in favour of Carlos, and that the team just needs to build upon what they've already learned and the implementations they've already made. That is seriously going to be something that they need to consider, or there are going to be less and less people who are inspired by Williams. And the Sainz hype drain that was generated at Ferrari, where many people thought that he absolutely overperformed expectations, outscoring Charles in many instances, maybe it was just with the car, that without the car, Carlos is nothing. And I don't want people to think that. I think it would be absolutely unfair. And speaking of Ferrari, maybe this eases Carlos's pain a little bit. Lewis Hamilton, yes. I think it's safe to say that he definitely needs a better second half of the year, and even he thinks so too, especially off the back of his Instagram post where he's talking about just we and meditation and just recollecting himself and just going forward and just trying his absolute best. And that is absolutely true. But I have said this once and I will say it again. This has not been the fairy tale season start that he was hoping for, where he could win within the first few races before we got back to Europe and could say triumphantly, yes, this was an absolutely brilliant choice that has gotten off in the best manner possible. Because the first half of the year, Charles Leclerc hasn't exactly soundedly walloped him into the ground, but the Monegasque does have the upper hand because he too has had many maladies, even though he's been the one to be getting Ferrari some podiums to their name. Lewis has come close a few times with some P4s. He has had that sprint win in China, which means there was potential. But there is something to really consider here, that the onus is not on the drivers themselves, but also the team. The team do need to step up to the plate for both of their drivers in regards to the reality that they simply configured the SF25 to rely on riding really low to the ground, something we found out in Shanghai to their detriment with a double disqualification, and now they are naturally compromised until things can start anew in 2026, where you don't have to rely on ground effect and instead you rely on engine grunt and you rely on top-end aero that doesn't go anywhere near the floor. Maybe that could be something that will help out Lewis Hamilton and could transform his future in that regard. In the case of this year, it does very much need to be something that I talked about in my video last week, and Lewis just needs to just deal how he just treats the public, the press. He doesn't need to go all guns blazing and saying that he's absolutely terrible. Self-deprecation? We all thought that was Lando Norris's stronghold, but no. It turns out Lewis Hamilton is the champion in that too. Really digging into himself unnecessarily and inviting criticism up the wazoo. Whereas Fred Vasseur is basically saying, well, simply what Lewis is saying is not the Lewis that we see in the background. We just see him to be really professional in terms of engineering, so don't take him too seriously. No, that wasn't him actually insulting him. It's just mainly just tune Hamilton out when it comes to him lamenting himself and saying that he's worthless and Ferrari should change their driver. I want Lewis to succeed, and I want to see him prosper within this organisation. I want John Elkann and Benedetto Vigna to realise they made a good choice in terms of a leader and a driver, not some sort of marketing ploy, because it's becoming very clear that that was their modus operandi for hiring Lewis, which is not fair, because this is a boyhood dream of Hamilton's, and now it's being played for cash. And it's really ironic after Hamilton said not that long ago, cash is king. So what exactly needs to change for Lewis, as well as him just tempering his public image in terms of press conferences and post-race interviews? Well, simply put, qualifying. Qualifying is something that has been hounding him throughout the entire ground effect era. This is something that he needs to improve upon, because what we saw in Spa, when he can tune the car right, he can catch up remarkably quickly, get back into the points solidly. There is nothing wrong with his late race pace or anything. It would just be nice for him to ideally start up that little bit higher and therefore gain a little bit more kudos in that regard. Maybe he might be able to get that podium after all, and if he can do that, that would be a huge transformative upward lift, which would mean that he can get Ferrari some silverware. Sure, it's not exactly a win per se, but let's be real, McLaren are absolutely dominating in regards to that. Ferrari might get a cheeky win here and now, so can Mercedes if McLaren falter, or if both drivers take each other out, or if there's a mechanical failure, because McLaren are due that, because everyone else has had some sort of issue. McLaren have been really, really reliable, but we are heading toward the second half of the season where we can see these issues, and next year, who knows in that regard. But in the case of Lewis, I do think that he needs to be that little bit more tempered in his delivery, and he also needs to boost up his qualifying, because otherwise we are going to be seeing more of the same criticism next year, and also it might then cause him to doubt himself at a moment when everything is completely reset, and we might see a Hamilton which absolutely loves this new formula, or Formula One. And yes, I will get onto this, Yuki Tsunoda needs to definitely have a better half of 2025. This is not me being harsh toward the guy, it's absolutely true. I do think there is more of an opportunity for that to happen, because he is now at a Red Bull where the team principal and CEO of the racing operation is somebody who has his back, who understands him completely, was one of the biggest champions for the Japanese driver as to why he did deserve to get the promotion up to Red Bull, and now that he has it, yeah, it's been an absolutely rough ride where Verstappen has completely walloped him. Not mostly from the fact that Max is simply a better driver. Of course he is. He is better than Yuki Tsunoda. You can't deny that. But the second seat curse has definitely been proven to be factual reality. It's really changed the perception of Sergio Perez. It's sort of tempered the negativity toward Liam Lawson. It's made us reevaluate what happened with Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly. It's something that's given us a bit of a reality check, a wake-up call. And that might provide Yuki Tsunoda an opportunity to survive at least one more year with the organisation, to make sure that everything is re-established, reaffirmed, that it's rejuvenated the team before maybe Max Verstappen moves on to another project or out of the sport altogether. But we're talking about Yuki Tsunoda here. And like with Lewis, qualifying needs to be improved. There is very much a case of one lap speed being there. Helmut Marko, Mekis, they believe that Yuki is capable of that, but it's simply not been translating, because the gap between being out of Q3 and in Q3, it's within hundredths now. It's so close. And oh yes, traffic. That's been really annoying this year, and it's certainly been driving many drivers mad. And what needs to get better? Well, start by shrinking the qualifying delta to a more manageable margin. Then maybe bank points where he can get some P8s, P9s, P10s instead of 12ths through 14ths. Then the narrative might change a little bit. And then something I touched upon in my Dutch GP predictions video, that Alex Palou might be on the market or considering a Red Bull move either next year or the year after that. The Japanese driver might get a stay of execution for 2026 for the sake of consistency, as Red Bull steady the ship, but it might be only a fleeting gesture. It might not guarantee him as long of a Red Bull career as Sergio Perez was afforded, especially when 2023 was looking really wobbly, and many people were asking him to be removed then. Yuki Tsunoda has unfortunately been a victim of the press sort of going, yeah, Red Bull, we know how you operate, just get it over with already, we think Yuki is quits, which is absolutely not fair, with Tsunoda having Verstappen as one of his major backers. But the second half of the year is going to be a very big turning point. How many points does he need to make for us to reserve judgment for next year? I don't really know. But one thing is for sure, we need to have more Q3 appearances, which is certainly possible, as we saw in Spa, if he gets the same machinery as Max. But in reality, it just needs to be a situation where Red Bull provide him the tools and the team necessary. It's on the team to help out the driver to negate the issues of the RB21, which is still very much squarely placed with tunnel vision toward Verstappen. Hopefully the RB22, because Yuki Tsunoda, 22, RB22, it's only natural, needs to have a more neutral car, which then in turn, like with the V-Carbo 2, can be tailored to one driver and the other driver with a solid baseline. If the Red Bull can do that next year, then great. Maybe Yuki might get one more year to prove himself. But the groundwork needs to be just score some low-tier points. That's all Yuki needs to do to try and make amends. And then, Kimi Antonelli. The first half snapshot is that he's got 64 points to George Russell's 172. It does tell the story of a rookie season that has started bright, but it has sagged a little bit. And Mercedes do admit some development missteps made the car trickier, which does tend to punish newcomers first and foremost. And against his team, he owns the intra-team scoreboard, George, and high-profile errors and unreliability have only amplified the gap. What's gone wrong exactly? Well, apparently a narrowing setup window, the W16 not performing where many times the engineers thought it would perform, and simply put, just the realities of being at Formula One with a team which is absolutely top tier, top shelf. You still got to remember, 64 points in your first season with Mercedes, where they are right now, is not terrible. It's something I'm really impressed about, and I think will serve Antonelli good when it comes to his future. He is going to be around for a good long while. To write him off right now would be a fool's errand. But what he does need to do right now, in the second half of 2025, is to get back scoring points a little bit more regularly. Sure, it doesn't have to be a barnstormer top 5 effort, which I do predict for the Dutch Grand Prix to be a little bit frisky and to not be just going, oh, it's, Lando, Oscar, Max, George, Leclerc sort of thing, as I have been predicting, because, that has been the form book. But even if you can just get a few more 8ths and 7ths every now and again, whereas George is in the 4th and 3rd place territory, that'd be fine for Mercedes. That might be enough to keep them in the hunt for 2nd place in the Constructors. And if Antonelli can do his part to keep Mercedes at the middle or top end of the front-running pack, then that's not too bad at all, considering that last year they were 4th place in the Constructors. If they can do better than that in a year where they were expecting to write it off because they were just building a rookie, then that would be an absolute win in my book. But there is still the reality that Mercedes have not locked in their lineup for 2026 yet. Sure, Max Verstappen has committed himself to Red Bull for next year, so George Russell may not be in imminent danger. He might get a deal that he sort of wants. As for Antonelli, it's still a bit of a question mark where it really doesn't need to be. And Toto himself has said that he has a 3-year plan for Kimi. Just you wait. He has got patience with him. The engineers have got no issue with him. So just write the damn contract, mate. Seriously. And then in terms of just other drivers who I think could do that little bit better but have done okay, Liam Lawson is certainly somebody I think has turned a corner. Isaac Hadjar has certainly piqued expectations a lot more than many people thought they would. And Oscar Piastri, well, what more needs to be said about that guy? We all thought after his 3rd season, he just needs to get that teensy bit closer to Lando Norris, but look at him now. He's absolutely right there next to him or beating him soundly. That is remarkable. Gabriel Bortoleto, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. One of the standout rookies of the year, slowly gaining more and more momentum after many people wrote him off or just thought, he's nothing special at the beginning of the year, including some of his own countrymen. I'm so glad that many people are being proven wrong in that, and I thought, I told you, Gabi has something to be said about this here. But I'm still really leaning back to Liam Lawson and his story within 2025. Some of us reveling in his misfortune at Red Bull Racing, only to find out that things were really stacked against him, and now racing bulls are starting to come into their own, finding ways to bring back Liam's confidence, tailoring the car more to him, and Isaac can have his own thing, and now both drivers are doing the business in keeping Racing Bulls competitive in the midfield. It's a really big tour de force, and it's something that I talk about in this video here that you can go and watch right now. Do not sleep on Liam Lawson. This is turning out to be a really interesting narrative. He might still be around next year.